Alright, so using howitzers, I have planned to make a dedicated video on setting up a siege and one for surviving mid to late game, both of which are going to cover howitzers, but in this I'm just going to look at howitzers themselves, so mechanically how they work and how you can set them up to advantage. So what they do, why you use them, well, number one, they introduce an extra dimension to the match, so howitzers have to be answered with an opposing howitzer. When you see someone using them, you need to be using them yourself to engage across the two howitzer dimensions. So generally you want to be making them in advance in the expectation of a howitzer battle at some point in the game. Number two, they allow you to deny someone the freedom of setting up close to you. So if someone is coming around and building near you, these howitzers will allow you to destroy that position and to stop them from boxing you in, potentially. Number three, they provide you with a means to soften an opponent's defense before moving in with your army. So if they have gun towers, you will generally want to take those out of a howitzer before you move in, so your tanks can get in unimpeded. Fourth, they are excellent tools for applying pressure. When you're being hit by howitzers, it's a very uncomfortable situation, so you can apply a great amount of pressure by using howitzers. And lastly, number five, they present as an extremely high value target, which allows you to influence and control how your opponent plays. So you could bait out a push, for example. If you're using howitzers to great effect, the opponent's going to try potentially to come in on the zone and to take them out, which can give you an opportunity to eject him and then maybe get a kill on the ejected pilot. So they're very good tools for kind of making your opponent play in a certain way, so you can have an influence on how they act. So you can keep them distracted, you can keep them focused on you, and the howitzers present as a very key target to destroy. You don't want to leave them up. You don't want to leave them to be destroying your position. Okay, so going into a bit more depth on the role of howitzers. They're used almost always, so in almost every game you'll see howitzers. In some games where attacks are happening early, for example a rush or something along the lines of a rush, a very early engagement against tanks, you may not need to use them, or they may not even be the right choice because of scrap and time management, the constraints in those two, in the strategy the opponent's using. So sometimes they're not going to be a good choice, but almost always they will. The times when you may not want to use them is when, obviously, like I say, you're expecting a quick attack, things are happening too quickly in the early game, and you may have the opportunity to win just on tanks alone, but I say 90% of the time you will want to use howitzers in your game. So aside from that, howitzers are vital in having the extended range to hit enemy positions, and you can draw battle lines with howitzers. And like I say, they must be matched against each other. So if your opponent is using howitzers, you need to be using your own to take out theirs. That's called the Howie War. And like I say, it's because they add a new dimension to the game. So the only real way to counter a howitzer is with your own howitzer to get them into range of each other. And howitzers can destroy everything on their own. They can win games on their own. The limiting factor is just how slow they are and how they're exposed to offensives. So they do take time to destroy things. So obviously you can stack up the numbers, get 3 or 4 or 5 going, and then they start to really do a lot of damage very quickly. But just 1 or 2 on their own is pretty slow. So I generally recommend you to have at least 3 or 4 is a good number. Now if you don't bother to make any, but your opponent is making them, it's only a matter of time before they destroy your entire base and they're shelling your recycler to death, while being in complete safety from your army if they have GTs, gun towers protecting them. So this is why you need your own. If they're using them and they're hitting you and they're protecting them with gun towers, there's not much you can really do to hold them off except to go in for a direct attack and engage, or just get your own howitzers up and hit theirs. Hence the howitzer war. So if you're set up against the edge of the map, if you're in a corner and your opponent starts hitting your recycler with the howitzers, you may not be able to escape I mean, you could undeploy and move backwards, but eventually you're going to run out of room, and then you may be trapped. And so the defeat for you is essentially guaranteed if you do not get your own up and fire back. This is why you need them, because they can just simply push you into a wall, into a corner, and then you're stuck. Your recycler has to be undeployed, and it's just going to get eventually destroyed. So yeah, as a result, I would always recommend you to have at least 2 or 3 preemptively built in advance. So even if you're not fighting yet, and your opponent's not got any, you should at least have some howitzers ready. In the event that your opponent comes forward and arrives with them, you need to have yours ready to fire at his, and to destroy each other's at the same time. Now, as soon as you lose one, you want to replace it, and you always want to have them firing. So every second that your howitzers are not firing at something, it's time wasted that you could be doing damage. And the key target, of course, of howitzers is the enemy howitzer, so you can deny them their dimension of howitzer. Now, when you advance to attack, you want to bring your howitzers forward with you and protect them, and keep edging them forward gradually as you gain ground until you can target things deeper and deeper into their territory. So once you take out the front gun towers, bring them forward a few meters, a little bit closer, then take out maybe a factory, and then keep edging them forward as you protect them. And once you have them in range of the enemy base, you are initiating a siege. You are sieging them with the howitzer, because they have to either fire back with them or push out and try and remove your position. So at this point you are effectively forcing your opponent's hand, and they're going to have no choice. They have to leave their base and engage with you, or they have to fire back with their own howitzers. So the mechanics of the howitzer, you want to place them slightly apart so they don't take as damage from enemy howitzers. So when you set them up, I like to put them in a curved line and have them at least a few meters away from each other, so that when one is being targeted, the splash damage does not do as much damage on the next door howitzer. So give them a little bit of space apart. Obviously try to give them high ground if possible. If you're on a hill and you're firing down at someone below, your howitzers will have a range advantage, so you can hit further. And this is why you may have experienced situations where you're being hit by howitzers, but your howitzers cannot fire back. They say they're out of range because of the terrain height advantage. If you're on level grounds, then you can always hit theirs when theirs can hit yours. But if they're on a hill and you're below, there may be situations where you cannot fire. So you'll have to push a bit closer in order to get that range. This is why high ground for howitzers is really, really helpful. Don't need it, but it does make them more effective. Remember, the range of a howitzer is between 500 and 600 meters. And like I say, it will go up as you get a terrain advantage. So you can reach like a 650 meter range if you've got a very good elevation advantage. Now, in order to use them, you need to target with your own tank or target in satellite. I wouldn't recommend using satellite. I mean, it's pretty nice because you can get distances easier, you can target easier, and you can kind of determine the range faster by just targeting things. But generally, you'll be targeting things with your own tank, so you're forward towards the enemy position, so that the things come up on the radar, and then you can open up attack, the attack channel with the howitzer, and then you can target. Or you can use the T key, paint the target, and then press Alt key to have the howitzer fire. So attack and T key to target. And remember that your tank has a range of 400 meters on its radar, so the howitzer range is just a little bit beyond that. So if you see things that are just out of range of your own tank's radar, you may be able to still hit them with your howitzer. Just give it a try, check it. If they're out of range, bring them forward a little bit or target things closer. Now what you should do is put them into an F group. I personally use F4 just out of my own setup I have. Just for that I have F1 standard defensive, F2 upgraded offensive, so any SP tanks I've got around, I have them on a special group. F3 is going to be my APC or bomber, kind of specialized units, and F4 is my howitzer group. So that's just my personal way of doing it. You could do the same. I like that. The reason why you need an F group for this is, well, one, it's easier to select, so you just press F4 and you've got them open. And additionally, if you have other defensives built, like turrets or mine layers, they will actually block out the attack order when you select all defensives, when you hold control and press 2 to get all defensives. If you've got the other defensive units up, like turrets and mine layers, the attack option it either won't be there or it just won't always work, it won't work as you intended to. So you want to have your howitzers in an F group. And obviously update that F group as you add more howitzers or replace them. So you want to protect them, because they're very high kill priority. Obviously because they do things that no other unit can do because of their range, they're considered a very high target priority. So you want to protect them, and you want to expect that your opponent is going to try and come in and destroy them. So you want to keep yourself near them when you're using them to attack or to defend. And yes, gradually advance them and try to take ground with them. So when you destroy something, try to edge them forward a little bit, and then try to recover scrap from anything that you destroy. So if you destroy a gun tower, see if you can get in there with scavengers very quickly and pick up that scrap. And you should always replace any howitzers that you lose. So as soon as one goes down, build another one, recover that scrap, keep up the pressure. So you should go for stationary targets like gun towers, powers and silos, because obviously the thing of a howitzer is, because it fires and the mortar takes a while to arrive, if you're firing at mobile units, they're just going to miss. So you're better off going off of stationary targets, and you can weaken the position like that. You can target clusters of enemy units, so if the player is moving around with his army, you could target a unit in the army, or the lead unit, the player, and that can do some damage if he's sort of sticking in the same place, and that can weaken the units ahead of a battle. So it's a good idea. When they're lingering around your base, just target the tanks, and you may be able to do some splash damage on the tanks. That's pretty good. And obviously they can't sit still. If they're sitting still with their army, then you can just do serious damage. So they've got to keep moving around. But when it comes to defending from an incoming tank attack, don't rely on howitzers, because in close range they are essentially useless in this role. They do some damage, but the DPS is very low once tanks are coming in. So you mainly want to use them to establish zones of control and to apply pressure on the opponent. So the best way to conceptualize the howitzer is you imagine a big circle around the howitzer. This is an area that you can control, and you can sort of move that circle around the map and expand it with more howitzers, and then you can simply, anything that comes into that circle of the howitzer, that 600-meter circle, that's free for you to destroy. So that's how you can use them to great effect, is conceptualize that circle around them, that zone that they control. And that's the mechanics of them. That's pretty much it, really. Very important unit. They do something that no other unit can do, and you should always be using them not only to attack but also to defend. They're incredible for everything. They play multiple roles in the game, but obviously it's all based around their range, because no other unit in the game can match that 600-meter range. Lastly, a few additional advanced details. If the howitzer has a clear line of sight to a target, they will fire with a low arc instead of firing upwards into the sky and over terrain or friendly units that are in the way of their view. So if you have a howitzer behind anything of yours that's friendly, even a building, they will shoot upwards into the sky. But if they get a clear view to the target, they will fire forwards, and this actually results in a higher DPS. So that's one thing to bear in mind. Secondly, howitzers drop +2 scrap, so you can essentially farm them by allowing your opponent to destroy them, then recovering scrap and replacing them. So if you're not too familiar with this concept, refer to my net scrap game video, that'll explain that. But essentially, destroyed units will actually drop more than they cost to build, and you can farm extra scrap off of this. Yeah, that's all explained in that video, the net scrap game video. So yeah, you could effectively gain gradually a scrap advantage by replacing lost howitzers. This is one way a defensive player can build up a gradual advantage over the attacker, but remember that this obviously cuts both ways. If you're also repeatedly destroying theirs, they can simply recover the scrap, build another, and have +2 gain on the destruction of that unit. Yeah, so numerically, the howitzer costs 8. It drops 5 on destruction, so times 2 for multiplayer, that's 10. So that's 10 scrap you get from the destroyed howitzer for an 8 scrap build. You should try to use howitzers to create windows of opportunity to attack. So because of what I just said there with the scrap gain, you want to use howitzers by timing them with an attack, with a push of your units. So the moment that enemy howitzers go down to your own, or the moment that gun towers are cleared, or the moment that you destroy the factory, because then they cannot replace units for a short period of time. This is the key moment to then push in. So don't just keep firing back and forth and replacing. The game doesn't really go anywhere. It's a stalemate. So you want to destroy something, use that as an opportunity to then push in. You can refer to the video I've just uploaded with Zaid. So the moment that I cleared his howitzers of mine, the middle ground area below between our two bases was then open and safe for a short period of time until he replaced them, which allowed me to move in, get a gun tower, and then get ready to begin the assault up the hill. Next, they can work decently as an anti-APC unit, so the splash damage kills soldiers pretty well, pretty effectively. You might want 2 or 3 of these. If you're piloting an APC and you drop soldiers on the howitzer, generally the howitzer will actually destroy the soldiers before the soldiers destroy the howitzer. So that's quite an interesting thing there. They're decent at anti-APC. So you could theoretically use one as a defensive emplacement when APCs are coming in. That's one potential option. And lastly, the last thing I'll cover is if you give a howitzer the standard mortar from an armory, they will lose the 600 meter range. It goes down to about 200 or 250, but the DPS actually goes up a lot higher, and it can work very well against enemy tanks. But this is a really specialized type of howitzer that you may find a use for. The standard mortar costs 2, so this would be a 10 scrap investment. This is like a specialized type of howitzer that you may find an application for. So yeah, higher DPS, much higher DPS, but they lose the special 600 meter range down to about 200, and the ammo consumption is much higher. And obviously once you do this, once you give a howitzer this standard mortar, you'd have to recycle it and then rebuild it to get the stock mortar back. The mortar that the howitzer uses is a special one called howitzer. You cannot get it from the armory, so if you do replace it, you have to recycle the unit and build it again. But that is a kind of a specialized type of howitzer that you could use. I must admit I've only used this 2 or 3 times, really, ever, but it can be a nice type of special unit that you can use at kind of closer range.